Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gregory Holt, and I'm the Diversity Inclusion Liaison. And today's Diversity Speak series is Intro into Supportive Services for Veteran Families. This session is being recorded for training and/or record-keeping purposes. By participating in this session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of this session. At any time, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to place them in the chat and we'll respond to them as soon as possible. If you would like to ask your question or have a comment verbally, please note by doing so, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of the statements recorded as a part of the session. Because this is a recorded session, please place yourself on mute until the question and answer portion. If anyone needs captions for this presentation, it can be accessed by pressing the More tab, which is in the upper right-hand corner, Language and Speech, and finally turn on live speech. Any questions, once again, please place them in the chat and we'll try to address them as soon as possible. Now let me introduce to you the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, Chad Dion Lassiter, for some opening remarks. ED, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gregory. Just briefly want to say good afternoon to everyone. Welcome into the beloved community in the virtual space. Want to thank Gregory Holtz for always just being in the space to organize these and organize them with nothing but stellar organizational skills. Want to thank our Director of Communication, Director Brothman, and excited about this topic. Just really briefly, I am the son of a soldier. My dad was Sergeant Leslie Lassiter III, decorated veteran who did 2 tours in Vietnam and 27 years in the service, but suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. During the summertime, my dad literally in North Philadelphia would knock on doors in the summertime with a shovel, asking people could he shovel their snow. And then in the wintertime, he would knock on their doors by carrying, hedge clippers and also a lawnmower, asking them could he actually cut their grass. And so growing up in the community, my brother and I were teased. We were bullied because people thought our dad was odd. And at that time in the early 80s, you really didn't know what supportive services were there for veteran families. Over the years, I've learned from one of my dear friends, Dr. Cleo Jacobs, and Bob Dole's wife, who does a lot of things with services, armed support services for the armed services. So I'm here. The title is compelling. I'm probably going to go off the camera because some of that trauma of what my dad endured and what we endured as a family still lingers. But happy to be in this space and so grateful that PHRC continues to venture into various spaces on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth. To the 23 of you who are here, more people will join. But if it was only just the 23 of you, we are so humbled and honored that people are taking a break in their day, albeit all the work that everybody in the Commonwealth is doing to move us forward. Gregory, as always, as a servant leader, I'm appreciative of you allowing me to hold space to bring welcome. And if we have ASL on here, we're excited for you to be here as well, because you're truly a blessing. And it's an art craft and it's really an honorable profession. So without further ado, greetings and welcome.
Thank you for that opening, ED. Becky is a case manager and outreach coordinator for Soldier On, a private nonprofit organization committed to ending veteran homelessness. Becky has worked with Pittsburgh's unhoused community for over 9 years and the unhoused and at-risk veteran community for over 7 years. She is passionate about serving her veterans with a client-centered harm reduction approach to stable housing. Please help me welcome Becky. Becky, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gregory, so much for inviting me to be here today. Executive Director Lassiter, I appreciate your comments on your family's history in the armed forces. I have that history as well, and I know that they're not always served super well when they get out of the military, so I'm really glad to be able to share Soldier On services with everyone. Just to highlight some of the ways that we're trying to do that a little bit better. So yeah, without further ado, I will keep talking about our programs. I am just going to put in the chat my information and the Soldier On intake hotline. I'm just going to throw that there so that everybody has it. You can jot it down, take a screenshot, whatever you'd like. And I did bold the Soldier On intake hotline because please share that far and wide. That's the best way to get veterans connected to us. Just kind of a really streamlined office, right in, well, I'll go on to say, but it's in Massachusetts and New Jersey, just because our Pennsylvania office, office in quotes, we do not have a brick and mortar office. All of us case managers are either home working on administrative stuff, but mostly out in the community in one of our 23 counties serving veterans. So Soldier On does have the SSVF grant, which Gregory mentioned stands for Supportive Services for Veteran Families. There's actually an SSVF program in every county of the United States. So if anyone's interested or knows any veterans that might be outside of the counties that we serve, there's a big, scary Excel spreadsheet that has every single provider. All you have to do is do your Control F, search the any county in the US that you're looking for, and there will be a provider with this grant. So moving on, like I said, home office is in Massachusetts. We have programming in Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and here in Pennsylvania. We have residential sites in Massachusetts and New Jersey, so actual brick and mortar homes for veterans, whether it's transitional housing, permanent housing. So some really good stuff over east happening as far as residential. No plans right now to have it in Pennsylvania, but I'm always hopeful that maybe someday that could happen, because I think we all know the housing market here, and if we can have a little bit more choices and affordable choices at that, I think that would certainly be great. Soldier On does have the SSVF grant in all states that we serve. In PA, we're completely mobile. We go directly to our veterans. I included our website here as well if you want to check out any more details about us, see some photos, more info about the different residential sites that we have. One thing that I like to emphasize about our approach to SSVF, as opposed to, there are other SSVF grantees in our service area, but one thing that sets us apart is the mobile model. So when I get assigned an intake, I go right to that veteran to see them, whether that's at their house, if they're in the hospital, if they're not comfortable meeting where they're staying for whatever reason, we can go meet at McDonald's, at the library. So I think that does set us apart, just kind of removes that extra barrier of transportation, which we know a lot of folks face. So our eligibility is pretty low barrier. Veterans do not have to be VA eligible. So if they don't go to the VA, that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're not eligible for us. And in fact, it likely means it, a lot of people aren't. A lot of veterans that we serve aren't. I would say in my caseload of 30, I probably have at least 10, if not more, that are not eligible for the VA for whatever reason. So sometimes when folks have been told they're not eligible for the VA, they think that they're not veterans. So it might, you might come across someone if you say, have you ever been in boot camp? Have you ever enlisted? Like that might trigger them more to put that together, because I have had countless veterans say, well, I'm not a veteran to the VA, but they're still a veteran to us. So we can accept most discharges. The ones that we can't are bad conduct and dishonorable. If they have an other than honorable, that's a really common discharge. We can work with them. And I will be honest, in all my years of doing this, I've run across, I think I can count on one hand, the bad conduct and dishonorable. It's not terribly common from my experience. I don't see it very often. We also do now accept reserve members. It's a little bit of a gray area between reservists and National Guard, because one is federally funded, National Guard is state funded. So to be eligible, they do have to have federally activated service in the National Guard. That's not for any of you to suss out. Like if you encounter anybody that might need our support, even you can just send them to us and we'll figure that out based on their documentation. But it was a big step to allow reservists to be eligible. That's only been within the last few years, because before there were next to no resources for reservists. Income threshold is below 80% area median income for the household size in the county. So as an example, for Allegheny County, a one-person household would have to make under $60,100 at effective 2025. So that does obviously shift if there are more household members, or if it's in a more rural county where that might be lower. But we expanded that about 3 or 4 years ago to get more people enrolled. It used to be 50% AMI. You can imagine that when it jumped to 80, that removed even more of a barrier. Some of those guys and girls that slip through the cracks of the income eligibility. A key thing for eligibility purposes is that the veteran must be unhoused or they must be at risk of homelessness. Unhoused can include staying in their car, staying in an abandoned building with no utilities, staying in an emergency shelter, or in risk of homelessness includes usually eviction notice. Sometimes if it hasn't quite gotten to eviction and they just have a notice to quit from the landlord saying, hey, if you don't leave in 10 days, I'm going to file for eviction. We can accept that. And in some cases, we can accept like a note or like a letter from a family member saying like this veteran has 2 weeks and then they have to get out of my house. That gets a little bit gray because our program is really designed for homeless and imminently at risk veterans as far as their housing goes. Must be in one of our 23 counties. I'll show you that map here in a second, and cannot be enrolled with another SSVF provider. So like I said, there are sometimes multiple SSVF providers per county. We try to just ask veterans, like, are you working with Veterans Leadership Program? And if they are, that's fine. They just can't be enrolled with both. So we usually just figure that out. One program might be better than the other. VLP has some funding that we do not have, so that might benefit the veteran, or maybe the veteran would do well with like a mobile model because of transportation. So we try to kind of figure that out if that does come up. This is the map of all the areas, or all the counties rather, that we serve in Pennsylvania. So everything inside the red line. So you can see we've got a pretty strong hold on the western part of the state. But like I said, there are SSVF providers everywhere in every single county. So if someone's in Indiana and they want to scoot over to Cambria, we can do a warm handoff to an appropriate SSVF provider. Similarly, if someone's in Cambria and they want to move to Indiana, then we can work those things out so that we can transition them over so that they still have support. So our enrollment process is pretty simple. So the veteran can self-refer. This can be done through a provider or a support person. So I work with a lot of the street outreach teams in Pittsburgh. If the veteran does not have a phone, the support person can help facilitate that call. Obviously, we're going to need to connect with the veteran to get their information and just, talk with them and get to know them. But we have a pretty good relationship with folks in the community as well if a call from the veteran isn't possible. But best way, I would say, most streamlined way, is to call that hotline. What happens is the phone rings in New Jersey, where the intake office is, and they ask just a few questions to the veteran. Based on their zip code, since we are in several states, they route that referral over to the appropriate state, and then they get assigned to a case manager. And we are tasked with calling them within about 48 hours. So this is supposed to be a pretty quick process. If I get an intake today, I should be calling them by tomorrow, maybe Monday, but I personally don't like a whole weekend to pass by without making contact. Then after that, so I get assigned an intake, I talk with that veteran about where and when they can meet, and then we set up an intake appointment. So then at that intake appointment, we do an eligibility screening. As long as they're under the income limits, they meet our eligibility as far as their military time, a reservist or active duty member with any discharge other than bad conduct and dishonorable, and that they are rapid rehouse, like they meet the rapid rehousing criteria, which is to be literally homeless, which does include in a shelter, or homeless prevention veterans would be at risk of homelessness. If a veteran is for some reason not eligible, we don't enroll them, but we do try, which basically means, they're not going to be eligible for temporary financial assistance, and we're not going to be doing, real intense case management with the veteran, but we do still try to provide light touch case management and external referrals. So one thing I'll see a lot is sometimes a veteran will call the hotline and they'll only be facing a utility shutoff. If that veteran is housed stably, meaning they are not at risk of being evicted, then they are not eligible. Unfortunately, like a utility shutoff does not meet our grant's criteria of being at risk of homelessness. So in that case, I would try to give that veteran, I'd try to connect them with LIHEAP, customer assistance programs, Dollar Energy Fund, one-time assistance programs if they're available. PHRC is a great resource. PHRC, I always call it the 211 of veteran services. They're actually housed in the same building as Veterans Leadership Program, but they're really kind of the one-stop shop just for sort of random needs where veterans might not be eligible for us. We can send them there and they can kind of route them to the appropriate services. So SSVF is our main grant. So for the initial enrollment, the veteran would either be rapid rehousing or homeless prevention, depending on their situation, whether or not they're literally homeless or at risk. We do have limited temporary financial assistance for things like rent arrears, security deposits, rent payments, utility deposits, utility assistance. The nice thing about the SSVF grant is that it can be run pretty flexibly. So some providers, they do their thing where they're like, here, you have 6 months of rent. Let's work on, so that 7th month, you're able to sustain your housing going forward. We don't do that. We don't have a given amount of TFA, which is temporary financial assistance. It's case by case. So our grant does have limits. It's typically around 6 to 9 months in a 1-year period. But if a veteran is, gainfully employed and just needs help with getting into the unit, as we know, getting into an apartment can typically cost anywhere between $2,000, $3,000, maybe $4,000, depending on what the landlord's asking for. We could help them with that amount so they're not having to shell all that out. And then, we want them to find an apartment that they can afford realistically so that we can step out. So the big thing for us is keeping the veteran housed, really focusing on stability and a foundation so that we're not just throwing money at them and then dipping out. That is how that can be, because it can be worked that way. It's a very flexible grant, but we try to be really strategic with our money. We try to explore external resources when we can, just so that, if that veteran then gets fired or laid off, they still have some assistance left with us so that they're not burning through it. So that's kind of our rationale. A lot of times veterans are like, well, we know you have the money, so why aren't you helping? It's because we want to do this in a strategic way so that you remain stable. And if something happens, then we can get you back stable and you haven't just burned through all the money that you're eligible for. Big part of our case management is peer mentoring. We have peer support. So we actually have hired an extra peer, which I'm really happy about. They're going to be starting in just a couple weeks, but they can help with transportation, to housing, well-being appointments. They can also do peer mentoring. So our peers have to be veterans of some branch or, reservists, whatever, but they do have to have some, that we do that for common ground purposes. I'm not a veteran. I have a lot of family that are, but I'm not. So I don't bring that same experience and expertise that some veterans are really looking for to connect, because they're, they might share the same types of problems or just have that camaraderie that I think is really important to our veteran neighbors. We also have a program called Shallow Subsidy. So what Shallow Subsidy is the veteran does have to be enrolled in SSVF. They can't just walk into Shallow Subsidy. They have to be enrolled with SSVF first, But shallow subsidy is a program where we can pay up to 50% of the rent payment for a veteran for up to 24 months. So I have an example here. Say a veteran, they're homeless. We get them housed in an $800 apartment. They demonstrate that they're able to pay, but just to help them get on their feet, maybe they have a goal to save, maybe they want to buy a house, maybe they're paying off debt. We can get them into shallow subsidy. Then they would pay $400 a month. We'd pick up the remaining $400, and that could last for up to 2 whole years. So that we found that is a really, really nice kind of segue from SSVF, which is a kind of an emergency type program, to then shallow subsidy to build, continue building that foundation of stability. And then after those 2 years, they, can kind of graduate into sustaining their housing stability, hopefully on their own and not needing assistance. Although if they ever do need assistance, they can always call us back. Okay. Okay. A couple of additional supports that we offer are healthcare navigation. So healthcare navigation, the person again must be enrolled with SSVF, but they have a designated case manager called a healthcare navigator in addition to an SSVF case manager, which is like what I do, to help with specific healthcare needs. So if someone is not insured or underinsured, or maybe, if they only have VA coverage, the VA only offers dental, for example, in very specific cases. A lot of veterans don't qualify for dental. So maybe they use VA for all their health and mental health appointments, but they need Medicaid or Medicare for dental. That's something I refer to a lot. So they can help, the healthcare navigator can help with things like that. They can help with trying to line up like access transportation or MATP to help with getting the person stable transportation to get to their appointments. Maybe the veteran is going to need a higher level of care or in-home services. So I love our healthcare navigator. She's amazing. And she is so well connected with all these different things. And I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. I'm a housing girl. So our healthcare navigator is extremely, extremely helpful with all things healthcare. We also have a program called Soldier on Success. This program, any veteran can use Soldier on Success. They do not have to be with SSVF. This is really for credit repair with the end goal of homeownership. That doesn't have to be their end goal, but we have helped a lot. This program's helped a lot of veterans with purchasing homes if that's in their plan. But also just kind of, I've seen a veteran who goal of owning her own home, but she talked with Money Management International. They gave her 2 bills to pay off, which totaled under $300, and that resulted in her credit score soaring. So they can really give manageable steps that work with your budget to increase your credit score and your overall financial health. Okay. These are just some, as an outreach coordinator with my counterpart, Jasmine, we typically use this PowerPoint when we're, things like this, where we're wanting to get into a space to reach veterans. So some of the sites that we're in are in shelters, soup kitchens, VA, GPD transitional housing programs. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, those are places like Veterans Place of Washington Boulevard and Shepherd's Heart. So we go there frequently. We go to local housing, local housing option, LHOTS, I forget the whole acronym, but those are basically county meetings where they talk about specific housing concerns and continuum of care meetings. And we go to various events. If you all are familiar with stand downs, those are veteran resource fairs. We go to mainstream civilian areas as well, just to engage with any veterans that might be there. So if you ever have any ideas of where you'd like us, then we're always open to that, because we do have the mobile model, which I love. It also means that sometimes it's a little bit hard to get our stuff out there, just because there's not, you're not always seeing a sign. We're not able to hold really our own events because we don't really have a space. So we like to, really use our community resources to help get us out there. This slide just has contact information again. So it has the intake hotline, which I threw in the chat, also my co-outreach coordinator, Jasmine Jones, her contact info, and then my contact info there on the bottom. And I guess the last thing before, answering any questions, if anyone has any, would just be that I think PHRC can help us by sharing our intake line, calling me or Jasmine, or emailing us if you have any questions, or if there are any events that you know of that we could speak at. You can connect veterans to me if they'd like. I always tell veterans, I might not be your case manager. I'm carrying a pretty hefty caseload, and I have my outreach stuff. So if it's not me, we have a lot of other case managers. So I direct them back to the hotline, call there, get connected with that process so that we can get you a case manager like quickly, because we go through like a rotation of all our case managers for intake placements. And then they at least have, me as a contact if they have specific questions, and we can go back to the intake hotline to get them screened and assessed quickly. And then I think also ways that you all could help us is I've had really egregious discrimination cases from landlords. So I really love having you all as a resource. I think when Gregory and I were talking about this presentation, I had shared with him, I had an egregious landlord discrimination occurrence happen where a Black single mother was turned away from an apartment, and she should not have been. She had more than adequate income to afford a unit. I had helped her with filing a HUD complaint, but I think it would have been really nice, and this was a couple of years ago now, but I think it would have been really helpful for me to have known more about PHRC so that both me and that veteran could have talked to someone. And, the HUD complaint form is just an online form. There's not a whole lot. I don't think I got any follow-up. I'm unsure if she did. So I do think that is a really, really helpful connection for us as well. If there are anything comes to mind that we can do for you all, please you have my contact info. Please reach out. But I do see that there's a question. I can't see your full first name. Is that Jessica?
Jessica, you can come off mute for your question. Or you can type it in the chat if you're more comfortable, whatever works for you.
Hi, I just had to figure out how to unmute myself real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm in Washington County. I'm the DBOP for Washington County.
Oh, yeah.
And Washington County is a great county. It's a little bit of city and a whole lot of rural. But my thing is we have very long name for the Patriot House in the Washington City Mission. My thing since the beginning has always been, that's lovely. They have a wonderful program. It's great. However, it will not support female veterans. It cannot support female veterans. So then you're in a situation where a highly qualified veteran, served just like the men, is getting a different standard of service than a male veteran. Bothers me no end. But the question is, when I have a female veteran, what can I do to get them veteran-specific, veteran-tailored housing and rehousing job placement care that is not the Washington City Mission, because they cannot avail themselves of Patriot?
Yeah, thanks for that. That really sucks, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah. So I would say send them to us, give them that hotline number. We are really plugged in with, even though we don't have, so let me be clear about that. We don't just have, you send us a veteran, we don't just have a house ready for them, right? Like we don't have a transitional housing program. We're really working together on finding permanent housing. But that doesn't mean that we don't try to get them into a safe situation right away by using our community partners. So Veterans Place of Washington Boulevard, while not in Washington County, unfortunately, they do have some beds for women, LGBTQ identifying folks. So we can, if the person it would be open to something like that, while it is in Pittsburgh, we can always get them back to Washington and we can look for permanent housing in Washington. Veterans Leadership Program also has some transitional housing beds for women identifying folks. So I would get them to us so that we can plug them in with other resources, because you don't need to do all that calling around. Like we can work on that. While we don't have our own transitional or temporary housing, we work with those providers all the time so that we can get someone in a more stable situation so that they can more readily find not even just housing, employment, other resources, file claims, apply for Social Security, those things. So it's not a super direct, clear, concise answer, but there are programs out there. It might involve some relocation, unfortunately, but not terribly far. And with our peer support, if transportation's a barrier, we can often get that worked out. But thanks for that question. And I think I'm already, I used to have 1, 2, 3 women on my caseload. And now I see a lot more, and we're going to keep seeing a lot more women veterans. And I'm hopeful that that will inspire more programming for them, because it has historically been, all male. And even when it was all male, it wasn't really reflecting, the women veterans. Like there needs to be more, and I'm hopeful that that's coming, because we're only going to continue to see more and more female veterans.
Well, yes, because you have the problem, one, with female veterans who do not self-identify for whatever reason. And then it's kind of easier to see a homeless male veteran or a homeless male in general because they present as stereotypically homeless. And unfortunately, as things get worse in general in a society, they usually get worse for women first.
Always.
So we're going to see more and more, and this is just my fear, that as I identify them and I see them, that it's just like, what do I do? Because they have a great program, but just not free.
I would say a really great resource too is Robin's Home. Now that is in Butler. I don't know if you've got any interaction with them, Jessica, but they're amazing, and they're all women. All women veterans live there. They offer a lot of different groups. They offer support groups that can be attended virtually, specific to women, because women veterans have a lot of like co-occurring unique problems. I don't want to say problems always, but military sexual trauma. Men experience that. I've had a lot of male veterans experience that. Women experience it more, usually. So, which makes sense, right? Because the attitudes of factors, I like that, yes. The attitudes of, I'm sure, women being in the military probably weren't great, 30 years ago. Like maybe not even now. I'm hopeful that it's getting better, but I don't know. So I think there are a lot of co-occurring factors that are more unique to women. Not that men don't go through it, but I think that women go through it at higher rates.
So,
And
go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you are ever anyone, Jessica, I'm mainly speaking to you because you certainly see a lot of veterans in your role. If you aren't even sure if someone needs SSVF, like you can still call me. You can still give me a call. And I can at least just point you to some of these places in a more, specific in-depth conversation than we're having now. You absolutely can do that.
Now, I work I work with veterans kind of just vicariously through different things that I do, whether it be like ministry or even this job or other whatnots. So I always kind of think about reintegration. So when you have your veterans, you have your military folks who go off and they serve, and one of the issues that they come back to is that how do they readjust to civilian life? And I know that this organization, the PHRC, doesn't directly deal with that. But from your perspective, what are the best things that we as a society can do to help veterans reintegrate back to civilian life?
I think the word that stood out to me when you asked that question, Gregory, was like destigmatization. I think we need to be really gentle with everyone, but in this, in this conversation with veterans, there are sometimes especially if they went through, and I don't even mean just combat, if they went through any trauma in their service, any sort of abuse, military sexual trauma, maybe their mental health just, really hit the fan during their service because they were away from their families. It was hard to adjust to that type of structure. I think we need to advocate for them to get mental health support. I think we need to advocate for them to um, get drug and alcohol support if that's important to them, but we need to listen and we need to meet them where they are. The introduction that I provided you that you read earlier, Gregory, I really try to my veterans are in the driver's seat. I'm here to help, but I don't want to project any of my own stuff onto them. If they're drinking heavily, if they're using substances, let's talk about it if you want. And if you want treatment, cool. But if that's not your plan right now, you still, that veteran is still worthy of having a shower, washing their clothes, food, opportunities for employment and income and stability. And so I think, please help me destigmatize these things because I think me and the main, the civilian, non-veteran specific organizations, especially in Pittsburgh, the street outreach teams, all the different, more progressive organizations, like that's really what we want because we're not going to reach anybody if we're preaching to them. We have to be there with them and we have to reduce the harm. So we have to not tell them what to do and not preach our own values. What do they want? What can we do to help them get that? And if what I see a lot is this ambivalence, it's like stepping on the gas and the brake, right? So like veterans, they want housing, they want employment, but they're doing these things to hold them back. Like, let's talk about it. And I'm just very real with, I'll tell them like, I see you doing this, but you want this. What's that about? Like, what can we do? So I really think just like meeting people where they are, and that's not a super concrete action, but you can advocate with, legislation. There's a lot going on right now with HUD. I'm sure you've all seen. Call people, call local government, call senators. We need this funding. We need it to stay so that we can keep doing this work. So. I saw Jessica's comment that it was difficult when people act like they're afraid of you, so it's like reacting and helping by not reacting. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. I don't know how we are on time and if you even want to share more, but I think that's really interesting.
Well, no, it's kind of hard to explain. So, I came back to where I enlisted from. And when I came back, you don't come back the same way you left. So I had different mannerisms. Maybe my fuse, like you stay on 6. So if you're on a 6 all the time, you have a shorter way to react. and we're taught to walk towards the enemy. So if I have a problem, I have more of a tendency to hit that problem head on and to deal with it by approaching. And a lot of times civilians, you're taught to back away, that any move forward is seen as aggression. And sometimes when we are just dealing with it the way life, as in the way that we're used to dealing with life, head on and blunt and straightforward, sometimes, especially for me, I came back, women are usually around a lot of women. So with women, I tend to come off as more aggressive than other women. Like women tend to be in social circles socially aggressive. But as a military woman, we were more geared and trained into not being socially aggressive, but being more, okay, come on, let's do this, let's deal with it, let's get it hashed out. And having to integrate into civilian female circles, it was very difficult because then they would, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. What? Or like, I'm just talking about things that would be normal. I was an Army nurse. So I'm talking about normal everyday things. And then I look up sometimes and they're like, oh my gosh, the horror, you poor soul. And I'm like, girl, that was a Tuesday. What do you mean? And so that's what I mean kind of by helping by not reacting. Like the whole, I'm so aghast. You lived like that? You slept in a tent with boys? So like don't do that so much and try to understand like this was everyday life for us. So don't act like we're freaks of nature. Don't be so surprised when we tell you things that were normal for us. Yes, we're used to gunfire. Yes, we were used to getting shot at. Yes, I've seen gunshot wounds all the time. So, like, don't do that. Just treat us like normal people who have different experiences than you. Even if inside you're like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Try not to let it show, you know?
I really appreciate that, Jessica. That's because when you said don't treat us like we're freaks of nature, I was literally thinking that. I was like, I would feel like I'm like some kind of like freak. Like what? So that's really, and I think like what I was also thinking about when you were responding is like the term role. Like you had this role in the military, and this I think is probably an experience a lot of other folks in that have served have had. You have these roles, you do them for so long, 2, 3, 4, however many years, and then you come back and like that role is either not there at all or it's different. And sometimes my veterans will tell me something and I'll be like, holy shit, right? Like I'll be like, oh my God. Like but and I'll try, I don't want to normalize that what they've experienced is okay. So I'll say something like, does that feel traumatic for you? And if they say, and if they absolutely loss of identity and purpose for sure, that's what it sounds like. If they say, no, I mean that's just what I had to do. Okay, then that's my own stuff that I'm putting onto you. But if they say, oh, no, that actually does bother me. I can't sleep when I think about that or something like that, then that alerts me like maybe we do need to look into some support. So like I said, like listening, because it's not a one size fits all type of deal. And everyone's military experience is so different. Um, yeah. Everyone's military experience seems so different to me. I have never heard the same story twice. And I also have observed that not all PTSD is necessarily from military experience. What I mean to say is that a lot of the PTSD veterans that I work with, they already had that from growing up in poverty, from growing up with abusive family. So it's really interesting that they've already got that. They go into something that maybe did traumatize them, maybe not. Maybe they loved it. They loved the structure, they loved the built-in community. But if they were traumatized again in the military, and then they just come out of it and everything is so much worse if that's what happened. Like I said, that's not always what happens. Sometimes it's the best thing. A lot of guys and girls have told me that it's the best thing I ever did. I loved it. It got me away from my terrible home life, and I got to see the world. But then, they come back and there's still a lot of readjusting to do. So that really great time in your life has ended. And now what? So I just think every experience is so unique, and we need to not react of this like, oh my God, it's like, well, that's what it is. And maybe it didn't scar you. And if it didn't, great. If it did, let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just kind of wanted to jump into a quick shout out to my wife. One of the reasons why I have a zeal for veterans is because she's a veteran. She is a 17-year Air Force Reserve veteran. So um, we have these conversations to kind of her experiences and me like just kind of taking it and not having a judgmental because the experience is different. But at the same time, I also am kind of zealous for this access because of what we talked about before, Becky, in our experience with service coordination. I dealt with a lot of male veterans who were homeless um, throughout my many years. And one of the things here, particularly in Pittsburgh, is that the services available for individuals dealing with homelessness was a lot better. Like, particularly, I remember one day that I followed one of my gentlemen um, all day, literally all day. He was able to get his shower, his breakfast, his lunch, anything that he needed, even though he did not have stable housing and he was living in a shelter at the time. He was able to go through Pittsburgh and get everything that he needed while at the same time still working to achieve his house. He eventually did get a house, but that the burden of what am I going to do through the day? How am I going to function through the day? Did not exist so much because the services in Pittsburgh were stellar to the point where people were coming from other cities to come to Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh's had such a great service array for individuals dealing with homelessness. Now we see that a lot of those services are cut. And so, from your perspective, how does that additional burden deal with your clientele with the fact that they don't have the ability to get the basic necessities like they were before while still, digging themselves out of homelessness?
Yeah, it's awful. That's been really, really hard. And while I do feel safe in SSVF funding, I've had long conversations with my boss about that. Be what I don't think SSVF funding is at risk, at least right now. But it's almost like, but everything else is. So we're having to act like, with these Medicaid, these precarious Medicaid decisions, with HUD funding, it's really hard. And one service that has come up in a lot of our staff meetings lately has been that the VA has had transportation services for veterans to get to medical transportation. I don't know what happened because I didn't see anything fully publicized, but I just have to imagine it's probably just the efficiency cuts or whatever. But the healthcare navigator and I were sitting with a veteran that we both work with, helping him call to schedule transportation to appointments at the VA here in Pittsburgh. And mind you, he's right in Pittsburgh too. It's not like we're taking a 200-mile ride. It's 5 miles away from him. And we called to schedule this transportation, and they said, oh, well, we can only do 15 rides a day. Like, you have to be one of those 15 people. And we were scheduling an appointment at least a week, or a transportation to an appointment at least a week out. And our healthcare navigator does that a lot. And she is like, I tried to schedule this like 2 weeks and they were already booked. So 15 rides is absurd. I mean, that's that. And this gentleman in particular, he has severe mental health issues. I think that the bus is probably difficult for him. The bus isn't free, and he's not 65, so he doesn't get a free bus pass. So yeah, I mean, that's been really difficult, and that's why I am just elated that we've hired an extra peer, because that, if your stuff's getting cut, we're gonna have to step up while we have some resources to support. So it's taxing. And I have a caseload of 30 right now. That's really high. That's not, that's not something that's not normal. Like, which tells me that we need to hire probably, because I think there are going to be more and more people, and we've lowered our income, or actually rather we've increased the income threshold so that more people are eligible. And as more people become eligible, everything is so expensive that someone with bringing home, the 100% service connected disability rating, which is just it's compensation through the VA as a result of injuries or conditions that you've gotten in the military. The most you can get is, for one person, is just under like $4,000. But that people still need help even bringing that amount in when they're paying $1,500 for rent. They're not eligible for food stamps because they make too much for that, and eggs are $6 a carton. So yeah, it's really taxing. It puts a lot of extra things on us to do, like the transportation, just enrolling more people because more people need help even if they have a slightly higher income. Yeah, I think so. Their private funding, we do have a little bit of that, but I'll be honest, like I don't really have access to that. I don't know where it goes. But because, SSVF is just in Pennsylvania, at least that's our main source. But I agree, I think diversifying our funding is probably a good idea. So a long answer to your question, Gregory. It's really hard, and it makes a lot of extra work for us.
Yeah, and I bring that up for the audience because I firmly believe that there's an intersectionality between what is going on with our veterans and the housing crisis. That the individuals that we are dealing with, we might not even know unless they announce over the phone that they're veterans. We have to have a sensitivity, just in the same way that we have a sensitivity when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, all the other protected classes. At the same time, I think that we need to have a sensitivity to individuals who sacrifice their lives, who are willing to fight for this country on our behalf so that we are all safe and we came back dealing with those issues. So I think that we need to have that sensitivity towards them as well, uh, particularly if they're going through a housing crisis, if they're dealing with an employment crisis. So we just need to have that introspectiveness when we are dealing with our veteran individuals. And so, oh, 1 second. Becky, I want to say thank you so much for having this time, uh, having an excellent presentation. It really was. I was already inspired by the first time we talked, and I was just kind of re-inspired today. So thank you so much for having this time. Thank you, everyone else, for coming today, and hopefully we learned a little bit something new about the veteran space. And I say Rojas, I see that you're here. Thank you for coming. But I want to thank you all for having this time, and then join us next month. We're having another Diversity Speaks series, and I hope you all have an excellent day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.